The next piece is kind of the pièce de résistance, as the French say. It's a big piece, and we'll have our participants give us a few details about this piece of Tafelmusik of Georg Philipp Telemann. Now, this piece is called a quartet in a famous set of published music by Georg Philipp Telemann, Tafelmusik, which essentially just means musique de table. And curiously enough, when he published this piece after it was engraved, it wasn't announced in German. It was announced in French, musique de table. Now, this doesn't really mean much in French, believe it or not, and I have a feeling that there were a number of French people living in the 1740s and 50s who took a look at this and said, what is musique de table? You can't eat it. But what can you do with it at the table? Well, essentially, it's Gebrauchsmusik. It's music that people would get together in a house. That's the most important thing. It's amateur music of the highest quality. Did he sell copy? He sure did. In fact, there are copies of the Tafelmusik de table that you find in France. I think it was maybe someone like Michel Blavet, I'm pretty sure, who actually subscribed to this, and it was an expensive piece of musical publication. It goes off to Catherine the Great of Russia. It goes off to Handel, who was a close friend of. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players for essentially something called a quartet, which is not even a quartet. It's a trio with Basso continuo, but it's called a quartet, which means essentially that there are 4 independent lines. Okay? Yeah. How are we going to divide all this up? You've made an orchestration. Yes.
So we have Alfie on the top voice.
Yeah.
Then we have the 2 flutes. And then we have our continuo group, textural continuo group.
Telemann would be sort of impressed, because essentially this could be done with fewer people, couldn't it?
I hope he would have been. So here's I have a copy of the score.
I've got it. Yeah, I know the piece pretty well.
Okay.
In fact, I recorded it years ago.
Right.
Yeah. Now, who's going to talk to me about Telemann?
I'll do it. I'll tell you about Telemann.
This lovely lady, too, is a part of our academy this summer. Yes.
So, yeah, as you were saying, he published this in 1733, and it's actually on IMSLP, the editions that were the first edition, and you can see the list of people that subscribe to this, which includes, as you were saying, Handel and Quantz. It's really cool to see, the different parts that are there.
Now, the girls who played the Guignon had a facsimile of the good girl. This brings up the very important question of what edition are we using, you see? And I thought, well, I'll give them sort of 5 out of 10, because I was just given the modern edition. You would have gotten 10 out of 10 had you, just, yeah.
Had that out. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, continue.
Okay, so Telemann, also his autobiography, there's a few different iterations of it, but it's also online and it's very funny. So
He wrote 2, actually.
Yes, yeah. So if you have a chance to read it, it's very entertaining, kind of going through his whole life as kind of his mom not wanting him to be a musician, and then he goes away to school, and then he just can't keep away from music. Fate keeps bringing him back to music. So.
Yes, it's a reoccurring problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So he also was famous for sort of reviving the Collegium Musicum in Leipzig in 1702, I think it was 02. It had been around before, and he kind of was credited for reviving it before he moved to Sorno, which is in present-day Poland, where he kind of famously would love to listen to all the folk music jams of 36 bagpipes and a violin or something like that. And he said you can get a wealth of melodies out of just listening to these guys jam for a few hours. And later on, he ended up in Hamburg, from 1721 through his death in 1767, where he served as director of music. And he was offered the job that Bach ended up getting, but Hamburg offered him more money, so he was like, I'm just gonna stay. I'm good. So.
Yeah, I think the most important thing to say about this fellow is that first of all, he's a very good composer, but he was ubiquitous. Yes, people harp on the fact that he knew Handel and he knew Bach. Yes, very, very well. You know, in fact, Bach took the Leipzig job because Telemann didn't want it. They're that close. What is he, in terms of worth, is he as good as Handel or as good as Bach? I mean, his history just dealt him a cruel blow by forgetting him as they forgot Bach. I'd kind of say that I think in the next 15 or 20 years, there's going to be even more appreciation of how good he is. You know, he did die. I mean, he died a sudden death, you know, after he died, as Bach did, you see. Bach is now in thriving good health. Telemann's much better, thanks to your generation and maybe a few generations before. It's extraordinary music. But here again, we've got someone who knows about things elsewhere than in Germany. He travels to France at some point. And like Monsieur Guignon, can write in an enormous number of styles. You know, we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay? On to the music. Now, you didn't answer my question. You're playing top line.
Yes.
You're playing?
The Telemann first.
Yes. There's a flauto dolce, isn't there? There should be.
That's the bassoon.
Yes. And so we have, yes. And then we have this very rich continuo. Yes. Here we go. Why don't you announce the movements? Okay?
Andante, vivace, largo, allegro.
What are some comments after hearing this? What kind of adjectives can you sort of pull out of the air to describe what you've heard?
Excellent playing.
Well, excellent, that's too easy. Yes. What else? Well, it's elegant. It's worldly, yes. Elegance, I think, is a very important word in this. Yeah. It's, yes. It's finely honed. Excellently prepared. Watching Robert smile so much now obviously also means that it's been giving great enjoyment. Yeah. This is what this music is all about. I think one of the nice things to say about early music, it's up to say music before 1800, is that certain instruments like yours or like yours have a day in the sun very early on. I mean, can you imagine a flautist maybe 40 years, 50 years ago who didn't know anything about the 18th century, either French or German or, you know? What a loss. But that's the way flautists used to live, you know. They were playing Cécile Chaminade and a lot of junk. And the bassoon, of course, in the 19th century becomes a kind of a rather sleepy instrument. But it was one of the most extraordinary solo instruments in the Baroque era, and especially, of course, in Germany and in France. In fact, it's one of the best instruments, that, you know, solo instruments that existed. And that's nice to be able to say, you know, that you guys who are becoming specialists, essentially you're plugging into very good repertoire, you know. Who else are you playing? Are you playing Haute-Terre? Are you playing? Yes, good. Who else? Chedeville, Blavet, yes. Bach, yes. Handel, yeah. I mean, and what are you playing inside from Telemann?
Some Vivaldi.
Yeah.
Very good to us. What else are we doing? Haute-Terre, Little Bois Mortier.
Have you gotten into the?
Some Flash.
Have you gotten into some of the big Rameau, big pieces?
Yes, those are.
Yeah, Zoroastre, or yes, yeah. I have a few questions about the continuo. It's called fondamento, which is a nice old-fashioned word, actually, for the continuo. It's a bit anonymous. When you start to play out a little bit, it works. Concerning just a few anticipatory sort of beginnings of phrases isn't enough, you know. These people are playing in a very extroverted style, which is required by Telemann. And yeah, you guys are a little bit sort of, yes. I mean, that's in the nature of the beast. You don't want to sort of upstage the soloist, do you? In fact, Quatuor or Carl Manuel Bach, when they're talking about continuo playing, say, yes, you've got to take second seat. You know, the discreet continuo player is the best continuo player. But you're a little bit too discreet. And I wonder why you're playing the organ solely when we've got two instruments here. And I think that any Baroque, if I were playing Tafelmusik in some kind of fancy Hamburg house back in the 1740s or 50s, I'd be, you know, I'd have an organ and a harpsichord and all kinds of instruments. And it seems to me a little bit sort of woofy when it comes to some of the slow movements, and a little bit sort of less articulate in the fast movements. Was there a conscious choice? Was it because you sound a bit sort of like?
We tried both.
Yes. I mean, you tried one or the other.
We did not try switching between, because we didn't know if that would be an option. But
Well, as I said, I think the most important thing is you can do anything in Baroque music and get away with it. You know, it's true, you know. All you have to, you don't have to justify, you know, pages, this or that, or treatise number 4 or 5. No. Essentially, the input of the soloist and all the players, you know, is much more important, you know. If a piece works better on the harpsichord, use it, you know. If it sounds better on the organ, yeah. It seems to me that the only sort of crunch and bite and sort of articulation that we hear is coming from the is it an arch lute or a theorbo? Yeah. And that I kind of miss, yeah. Also, there are chances too where you can sort of shine a little bit more, you know, you can be in the sun a little bit more. Yeah, you're kind of under a rock, you know, and you don't want to be there. This is music where I think everybody should be playing, you know, full steam ahead. There's something nice also, you who perhaps know more about 19th century music or early 20th century music. Yes, there are fabulous chamber music pieces written in the 19th century, and all you have to do is think about Schubert or Schumann, or Brahms. But the fact is, the glorious golden age of small ensembles is this. It's the 18th century, and it goes way up into late Haydn. And this is also, it's an enrichment of a repertory, a kind of repertory which is simply extraordinary. And it's new. This is also one of the things that makes this music so extraordinary. You haven't heard it as often as you've heard a Beethoven quartet. I love Beethoven quartets, but the fact is, this music sounds as if it were literally written yesterday. Yeah, very good. Let's hear just a difference. This will perhaps be sort of, let's take the first vivace. Do we have time? I think we do. And you could just exactly sort of put yourselves on the harpsichord. And I think, too, just play with a little bit more. Yes, let's talk about a few musical details. You coached this piece, I would imagine, with Robert. Yes? No?
Actually, with Dominic.
With whom?
Dominic.
Ah, okay. I said earlier, when we were talking about Guignon, that different styles can be used for the same piece, depending on who's playing. I'm kind of, if I were criticizing it, which there's very little to be criticized, I'd say sometimes you're forgetting line, especially in the bass. Yeah. And I think, too, that you can keep these people going a bit more if there's a little bit more sort of just phrasing, longer phrasing in the bass. Yeah. Curiously enough, on the flauto dolce fagot line, you're actually using, you're seeing the beginnings of phrases and ends of phrases, which I think is very good. Yeah. Very good indeed. What would be my other criticism? I think perhaps a little bit more conscious work on dynamic shading. Yeah, I mean, he helps you out there a lot, but you can be a little bit more sort of forceful about that. Yeah. Let's take the vivace a few measures, okay? Yeah, okay, now, yeah. If this were being marked allegro andante, I'd say, yeah, that's a good tempo. But it's vivace, which not only means, I think, a quicker tempo, but a smarter articulation. It sounds just a little bit sort of waterlogged. And, it's how does one create dynamics if dynamics are not talked about or given in a piece? Well, it's very simple. In fact, it's so simple, it's childish. When you go up, you get louder, melodically. And when you go down melodically, you get softer. And you can tell an entire, I'm not talking about, imitation and fugal sort of entries and all that. I'm talking about generally, I mentioned this years ago to the Berlin Philharmonic, and they couldn't believe because I was giving them a set of Purcell pieces that had no dynamics. And I said to the basses, listen to the first line, and try to sort of, after 3 or 4, listens, you're going to understand that there's a melodic line that goes up and a melodic that goes down, And there they were. All of a sudden, they had an arsenal of very exciting dynamics, just following this very simple, childish way of making dynamics, you see. Yes. Let's not get the tempo. It's just a little bit sort of, old lady crossing the street, Okay, now, yeah, good. Yeah, good. Now, I'd like it much better, frankly. The harpsichord, and you have an advantage over the plucked instruments. You've got an entire keyboard that goes way up top. Has someone told you that you must never go above middle C? You can participate a little bit more, just in terms of, yeah, it's a bit sort of sage, as the French would say, which means a bit sort of wise sounding. Yeah, this is not wise music. No. Anyway, I think we've proved the point maybe that we could have a little bit more sort of dynamic and a little bit more just rhythm, just movement, you know, in the piece. Yeah, and it's. I think you sound better too. Yes. Do you have comments about what you've done?
I think those are great things, and like playing around with using the harpsichord instead, I think might be really, because I really like that sparkle that it has.
Well, I mean, it isn't the line. The line is disjunct, isn't it? It seems to me that if you have an instrument that can give you attack and consonance, yeah. Oftentimes, I talk about articulation patterns in Baroque music in terms of speech, in terms of syntax, even. I talk about vowels. Ooh, ah, you, oh, you, yeah? And you talk about crunchy consonants, yeah? And that sometimes is a better terminology to use than, just, staccato or, sforzando or, or legato, absolute, that, yeah. These are dialogues. This is speech in a curious way, yeah. Fine, that's very impressive. I mean, and as you know, we've heard two pieces, the Guignol now and the Telemann, that we could sell to any good concert hall anywhere. They're polished and they're ready for public performance, which is